Section 2 notes, or Section 1 notes, I'm sorry, Chapter 18, Section 1 notes. We're going to be dealing in the second section of those notes. The title is From a States General to National Assembly. All right. We talked about in the last part of the notes how France was broken down into those kind of three classes, and the top two rich classes didn't even pay the main tax, right? And we talked about what was going to cause revolution is, when people are missing out on those necessities in life, right? Like home, or I should say shelter, food, clothing. Those are just basic necessities that everybody needs. So if people are missing out on those, and then we also see certain people not paying, and I put it in quotations, kind of their fair share. And we discussed that a little bit as far as what fair share meant. That will get on people's nerves, especially when it is what most would be considered like the rich or elite of a culture not having to kind of put in money. We kind of debunked a little bit of maybe the rich in our culture not paying their fair share. We went into the breakdown of a little bit of tax information where, the top percentage in our country pays somewhere in the realm of 51% tax. So, to say they're not paying their fair share is a little unfair to say that, right? If somebody's making $1 and they're paying over 50% of that dollar, over 50 cents to the government, I don't know how much more fair you could be. I would equate that to being unfair. But again, I'm not paying 51%. I'm paying somewhere in the 20% bracket. So we get into this argument in France of back then, people aren't paying their taxes, people aren't eating, people are in dire straits, if you will, dying in essence, and the elite of the culture, especially the king and the queens, these monarchs, are basically frivolous about it. Who cares? Just one of the sayings was that one of the queens living so frivolously and having such extravagant hairstyles and clothing, and I'll get into that a little bit at some point, but at one point was told your people are starving, and her response was, let them eat cake. Kind of this attitude of, did she really mean let them eat cake? Not necessarily, but it was more like she was just so out of touch with what people needed. She had no concept of, cake. When we think of cake, we think of this extreme, this kind of luxury, right? I don't eat cake every night. Do you? Does anybody out there have cake every single night? If you do, one, you'd be fatter than me. God bless you. But, you'd be living pretty well if you're eating cake every night. Some people are struggling just to eat a meal every night, right? I mean, that's just reality. It's sad to say that, but that is a reality that some people go a couple days without really eating a solid, good meal. So for a queen back then to say, well, let them eat cake, could you imagine the president of the United States saying today, when asked in a press conference, people are starving, sir, what are you going to do? Or madam, what are you going to do? And the president or vice president said what? Let him eat, come on, let him eat some cookies. You might see a revolt immediately. You might see, because, people would get triggered so quickly. Imagine being the person that's not eating. You could understand where these kind of feelings would come from of, one of these, like, you better hold my jacket because now it's going down. You can't treat me like that. We can deal with a lot, but if you kind of poo-poo my hurt, my pain, my struggle in life, that's going to be especially when it's my children not eating. Uh-oh. I might be able to deal with myself not eating, but what if my kids aren't eating and you're getting this, let them eat cookies and cake, they'll be okay. Well, now you're going to catch some, all right? There's going to be a problem, all right? So I'll get into these notes. So the Estates General was composed of deputies. Remember, this Estates General was kind of like their Congress, from the three estates. So a bunch of people from the different estates, just like we have from every state representing us. The first and second estates had about 300 delegates. The third estate had almost 600 delegates. Okay, so we see the first and second estate, which are kind of the richer, having 300 each, and then we see the third estate having 600. So that's even. That's even. So if wherever there's a vote, what's going to end up happening? It's going to probably even out, and it's going to end up favoring the rich, most likely. But we'll see. So in order to fix France's financial problems, most members of the Third Estate wanted to set up what they called a constitutional government, which is what we have. That would abolish tax exemptions of the clergy and nobility. So get them to pay their fair share. Right? You can underline that. All right. Again, there's a lot of stuff in here. When you go back, you can kind of look it over, but I would underline that. So their goal was to set up a constitutional government. The meeting of the Estates General opened at Versailles on March 5th, 1789. There was an immediate dispute about voting. Again, here we go, this voting concept. Traditionally, each estate would have one vote. So think about that. There's 3 estates. If each estate gets one vote, and the 2 richest estates get one vote, it will always end up being 2-1 against the poor. Do you understand that? The rich are not going to vote anything that hurts them. The poor are going to vote to make it even or fair, and it's never going to work. The 2 are always going to beat the 1. Do you understand how that would be a problem? So the rich always win. The poor never have a chance for change in their government. All right? With the help of a few nobles and clerics, that would give the third estate a majority. The king, however, declared that he was in favor of the current system in which each estate would have one vote. So the third estate wanted every delegate to have a vote. So every single delegate, there's about 1,200 delegates. So this way they could get maybe people to come onto their side. Maybe have a rich person who understands their pain. Got it? Maybe says, I get it, and votes that way. But the king says, nope, we're going to keep it 3 votes, 1 for each estate. So the rich are going to win no matter what. And the poor are going to basically be told, too bad, suck it up. The third estate, the poor estate, if you will, the commoners, reacted quickly. June 1789, it called itself a National Assembly and decided to draft a constitution. So they go against their government and draft a constitution. They're, in essence, setting up a new government against the king. Is the king going to be happy? What do you think? A head shake. No, right? I mean, come on. No king's going to be happy that their people are trying to set up a new government. When the deputies of the third estate arrived at their meeting 3 days later, they found that the doors were locked. So they didn't allow them even into the assembly. So what they did was, I'm going off the notes a little bit. You can underline this. They decided to meet at what was a tennis court, that was near there. They all got together and they said, we will continue meeting until we come up with a French constitution. So they were not swayed. They did not back down from creating this constitution. And what this became known as was called, underlined, the tennis court oath. Pretty simple. They were meeting on a tennis court. We're going to stay together. They made this kind of promise. We're going to stick together and stay together until we make up this constitution. It was called the tennis court oath. All right, pretty simple. The oath they swore is called the tennis court oath. And Louis XVI began to make plans to use force against them. But before he could do this, a mob of Parisians, so a mob of French people, stormed what was called the Bastille. You can underline this. It was basically a prison and an armory, meaning it kept weapons for war there, and it kept prisoners there. So they stormed this area. It's a government building, okay? And they basically destroy it brick by brick. They rip it apart. So this is a crime against the government. This took place on July 14th. Paris soon came under control of rebels. At this point, the king was no longer in charge, so the revolt has started. Revolutions and peasant rebellions broke out all over France because of it, right? When one sees this work, another group says, oh, we can do that too, right? Makes sense. And then these all became part of what was known as the Great Fear. The Great Fear, you can underline that. This was a panic that spread quickly across all of France. I think back to January 6th that just happened. I remember getting all these phone calls the day that the protest happened at in Washington, right at the Capitol building. I was getting calls. My phone was blowing up. I might have joked about this a little bit. Like, I didn't even know what was going on. All of a sudden, I was really popular, and it was all these people calling me, telling me, "Are you seeing what's happening? Are you seeing what's happening?" Literally scared as to what was going on. Calling me, asking my opinion and all that. I felt important for a little while, like my opinion mattered. But this fear swept through people. Oh my God, they're attacking a government building. Yeah, I can understand how people would get scared. And imagine in a day and age when you couldn't get good information. necessarily, right? Today, we all have information at our fingertips. Hopefully, you're getting good information and truthful information. But a lot of times back then, you might not be getting great information and just being told the government's getting overthrown, people are killing people. Could you understand how there would be this fear, this panic going around? All right. So citizens began to form militias. All right. And because they were afraid they would be invaded by foreign troops. So why might a foreign troop want to invade France to stop the revolution? Why might another country come over and invade France to stop these revolutions? What do you think? Any guesses? Take a guess. Danica, I think you're going to hit your thing. Is that you? You trying to talk? No. Somebody? Nobody has a guess? I'm in another country. I'm a king, and I see France, all these things happening. Go ahead, Michaela. You can talk. Hit your mic.
It might be because they like who's currently in charge,
Okay.
and if that person stays in charge, the alliance that they have is solidified, so they don't have to worry about that.
That is definitely true. That's definitely true. They like who's in charge, so they're going to come over and try to help them out, right? We want to keep our alliances. How about in their own country? What might they be thinking about might happen? Go ahead, Will. Pedrick.
They don't want the same thing happening there. They don't want more rebels appearing, and then it's just this giant rebellion in Europe.
Bingo. Exactly. So both of those work together, what Michaela said and what Will just said. One is we like who's in charge, and we have these relationships there that we want to keep. And the second is if I'm a king or a queen, I'm looking at it going, I don't want my people to think they can rise up. Yeah, right? If the French rise up and beat up their king and queen and take over, well, what might my poor people start to do? Rise up and take over. Do you understand? So you might see an essay on that. You might want to write off to the side essay. There might be a question of that, okay? That is the end of those notes, all right? So I'm going to stop the notes right there on here.